About a week ago, several cities across Mexico were thrust into violence and chaos after an operation was conducted to take out El Mencho, one of the heads of the most notorious and violent cartels in Mexico. And to shed a little bit of light on the inner workings of the relationship between the cartels and the Mexican government, we invited a faithful Latter-day Saint on that has over 12 years experience working in the government of Mexico, and he shares some incredible insights. All this and more. My name is Jackson Wayne Paul, and welcome to Latter-day Saints.
What power shall stay the heavens from pouring down knowledge from heaven upon the heads of the Latter-day Saints?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Latter-day Saints, or welcome for the first time. What we got going on here is we're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We run our mouths on the internet on current events, and if you like it, subscribe, because there's like 58% of you that watch our show almost daily and are still aren't subscribed. So just make an account, click the button. Anyways, God bless you for being here. I've got a really awesome episode planned for you guys today. We've been wanting to talk about this whole Mexico situation and the chaos that's ensuing down there, but we wanted to wait because we had connections with someone that has spent over 12 years serving in the government in Mexico in various capacities. We'll introduce him later on. But just in case you're not spun up on what has happened over the last week in Mexico and specific parts of, Puerto Vallarta, Guadalajara, and stuff like this, we have this little CBS News clip that kind of gives a good overview of what has been happening, what caused this, and where we're at now. So, Brando, hit play.
Panic at a Mexican airport. You can see terrified passengers running through the terminal with dark plumes of smoke rising in the air just outside. This is at the Guadalajara airport yesterday after Mexico's military killed a top cartel boss. The U.S. Embassy in Mexico is telling Americans in the country to continue sheltering in place.
We spoke with a man from Maple Grove who says he had a surreal moment in Puerto Vallarta.
We were just on the beach and, all of a sudden, here comes a Black Hawk helicopter flying low over our hotel with their guns out the door. And I'll tell you, that kind of wakes you up a little bit,
Several airlines are grounding flights, leaving thousands of tourists stranded. Karen Hua has the latest.
Social media footage captured the panic at the Guadalajara airport Sunday as plumes of smoke could be seen outside.
You saw the ground workers running around, going inside, trying to hide.
Juliana Perez, who made it back to Houston, described the cartel-related violence she saw.
It's not unusual in Mexico. Just didn't think anything of it. Kept going, saw another car on fire. Okay, that's kind of weird.
Guadalajara was one of many areas that erupted in violence Sunday, as Mexico's most notorious drug cartel fiercely retaliated after Mexican special forces killed their leader, Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, widely known as El Mencho. The cartel he led has the highest cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine tracking capacity in Mexico, according to the U.S. State Department. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum urged calm Monday.
Amanecimos sin ningún bloqueo en ninguna de las carreteras.
And said the hundreds of roadblocks set up by the cartel across the country had been cleared. Many American tourists remain stranded in Puerto Vallarta, including Adrian Moorfield and TJ Perry.
You're kind of there indefinitely.
There were no outgoing flights until Thursday. That does not take into consideration whether or not roads will even be open, the airport will be operating again.
The violence in Guadalajara comes just a few months before Mexico's second largest city is scheduled to host FIFA World Cup matches. Karen Hua, CBS News, Mexico City.
Okay, so chaos is happening. Puerto Vallarta. I've been to Puerto Vallarta. Brando, have you been to Puerto Vallarta?
Sorry, I'm not on camera. Yes, that's where I went on my honeymoon.
Really?
Yes.
Oh
yes.
God.
I can't imagine being on my honeymoon there now. That would be terrifying.
Yeah, and so a lot of crazy stuff happening over there. It looks like they're taking efforts to try to, take out the cartels. They cut off the head of the snake and it looks like the rest of the body went crazy. And so unfortunately, some terrible things happening south of the border. In the last week, the situation has improved a little bit, but it is cause for concern when thinking about here in just like a few months, there's supposed to be FIFA World Cup games happening in Guadalajara, where this most notorious drug cartel has been operating and causing such chaos. And so there's a lot to be said about it. And there has been reports that the missionaries down in Guadalajara are all safe and accounted for. And so
Good.
God bless them. And we're praying for those that are in danger. But I didn't want to talk about this subject without bringing on someone like when we had Carlos Moreno on to talk about the situation in Venezuela, and he was able to come and bring some incredible insights. Today, we brought on someone that has a really in-depth background in working and seeing the inner workings of how the government functions down in Mexico. And so we're really grateful to have him here with us. So to give us a little bit more insight on kind of the inner workings of things happening in Mexico and specifically in the government, we brought on a faithful Latter-day Saint named Jeffrey Jones, who has actually had much experience serving in politics in Mexico. But Jeffrey, welcome to the studio. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
To help people understand the experience that you've had serving in the Mexican government, what offices have you held and what all have you done over there?
Well, the first office I held was Diputado Federal, which is like a federal congressman equivalent here in the United States. I was that from 1997 to 2000. And then right after that, from 2000 to 2006, I was a federal senator. You know, same as the U.S., it's a 6-year term. And then after that, I was Undersecretary of Agriculture over agribusiness development in Mexico for 3 years as well. So I was a total of 12 years in the federal government of Mexico.
Yeah. So that's a long time seeing behind the curtain. And I guess one of my first questions is being in those positions for that many years, what can you tell us about the relationship between the federal government and the cartels? Because I myself, I've, seen corruption on more of a local state police level, I guess, in Mexico. One time, my friends and I, we were driving from San Diego to Tijuana, and I was eating a Costco hot dog, and we got pulled over, and the police basically said that I was illegally trafficking foreign foods and that we were going to be arrested if we didn't pay a fine. And so I had to give $100 to the policeman. He stuck it in his back pocket and he sent us on our way. And so I've seen it on more of a local level, but what can you tell us about like the relationship between the federal government and these drug cartels?
Well, that's a big question, but that's evolved, I think, for many years into different ways of expressing itself. But yeah, there is an issue of the cartels. I guess what I saw on a local level when I was a congressman and when I was a senator, I would spend a lot of time talking with the mayors and stuff like that. And at first, it was an issue of I would hear these cases and they'd say, well, the cartels came in and they said that they would, or whoever's running that regional cartel that they were dealing with, offered them money for their campaigns, to support them on their campaign. They says, we don't want to bother anybody. We only want to know who's going to be the director of public security and who's going to be the director of the traffic, cops. And so initially, and a lot of those people, they would bite into that. I always told them, I says, you never do that, because the minute you buy into that deal, then, you become a target if you try to rescind on that type of a deal. But yes, I think initially that's the way it was. And then I saw, and this is what I saw locally. I'm not talking about the federal level, but at the local level, I would see that later on they wanted to get more involved. and getting government contracts and stuff like that too. So they would look to things like that. We even had a case there too, locally, where there was one of the operators of the cartel that actually wanted to run for office. He was gunned down because of some issues that he had there and stuff like that too. But they became more and more brazen, and you see that on a local level. And at the federal level, I believe personally that this is from information from someone that was a former attorney general in Mexico, but he was talking about in the times before we ever arrived in government, that the government actually was the one that did the logistics of the drug trade. The Federal Highway Patrol handled the logistics, and then the what they call the Policía Judicial handled the discipline, for the trade. So it was actually very much a part of that. It was handled at that level. That's probably shocking to a lot of people, but that is a reality. And it's a tough question, because when if you're ever thinking of running for the executive branch, either presidente municipal at the local level, which is a mayor, or if you're thinking of running for a governorship, which is the same as a governorship here in the States, or the presidency of the country, you have to understand that your basic function, your primary function, is to protect life, liberty, and property. And so how do you deal with that? You have to have that very clear from the very first. I think that one of the main problems there is there's two different theories, or narratives, I guess, that you hear. One says the narrative is that they say it's plomo o plata, which means lead or silver. In other words, that if you don't take the silver that's given to you, you'll take the lead that's given to you, with a bullet. My own thinking on this is that the more consistent, and I've never been in the executive branch, so I can't tell you from firsthand experience, but I think the main problem is people taking money as part of a campaign financing. So I think that you get campaign financing. The drug money has penetrated a lot of political parties and political campaigns. And so when people get into office, they go in and they're already committed. And then if they later on try to go against those cartels, then they have a serious problem, because they've already made a commitment with them. Or if some other cartel comes and takes over, then they'll take them out with that cartel, because the other cartel will come in and take out, the whole structure of what was ever part of that other one. So I think, that's what I've always told people when they've ever asked me advice. I say, do the best possible way you can protect yourself is to not take any money from anybody.
Yeah, and I'm sure
any one of those cartels,
people are put in positions in which they think, oh, I'll just do it this one time, get me off the ground, get me some exposure. But then once you open that door, there's no really closing it. And with these people, like you look at the images of the savage things that they're doing in retaliation to having, their head leader taken out, El Mencho. It's like, if you get into a war fighting against these cartels, like, I don't think that they're prepared for the savagery that is going to ensue because of, the way that they operate. And when I look at things happening in the Book of Mormon, I came across some of these verses, and I'd like to get your thoughts in correlation to kind of what has happened with the relation between the cartels and the federal government. But in Mosiah chapter 29, I'll read verse 21 to 23. It says, "And behold, now I say unto you, ye cannot dethrone an iniquitous king, save it be through much contention and the shedding of much blood. For behold, he hath his friends in iniquity, and he keepeth his guards about him. And he teareth up the laws of those who have reigned in the righteousness before him. And he trampleth under his feet the commandments of God. And he enacteth laws and sendeth them forth among his people, yea, laws after the manner of his own wickedness. And whosoever doth not obey his laws, he causeth to be destroyed. And whosoever doth rebel against him, he will send his armies against them to war. And if he can, will destroy them. And thus an unrighteous king doth pervert the ways of all righteousness." So I guess my question for you, Jeff, is, has anyone, like, with good, pure, righteous intentions, done any work to try to expose these people that have been corrupted by their relation with the cartels? And if so, what generally happens to people that try to bring those things to light?
Well, Mexico does have a serious problem with reporters and getting killed.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a high level of deaths amongst reporters and people that speak up, against this system.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, that's a reality.
Besides reporters, have there been any, like, I'm not super spun up on the current president of Mexico and kind of her rise into power, but have any, people running for office tried to run on a campaign of ending the corruption and, like Donald Trump says, draining the swamp when it comes to the United States? Has anyone done that in Mexico?
The issue of public security is talked about in Mexico only in general terms.
Mm-hmm.
References to it in that way. But I mean, personally, this is one of my criticisms, is that I don't see a clear policy about how you address that issue. And it's not, I'm not saying that it's an easy issue to address. It's a complex issue to address, but I don't see this in public discourse. It's kind of an avoided issue of talking about that. Now, there are voices that have very clearly said this, like you see Senator Lili Telles from Sonora, for example. She's been very, very outspoken against the cartels and against this complicity between government and the cartels. And there have been others as well. Xochitl Gálvez was also someone that spoke about this. He was a presidential candidate in one of the last elections as well. But really, it's you don't see much of this. This is one of my criticisms, is you don't see an overt criticism about this, and specifically, you don't see a way of how you're going to handle this. Like if you're going to get into office or something like this, or you're running for a governorship, or you're running for the presidency of the country, how are you going to address this issue? And the last regime that got in, just before Sheinbaum, López Obrador, I mean, his policy was actually abrazos no balazos, which means hugs, and no bullets. That just by ignoring this, it would tend to go away. But the violence only increased, and it worsened. Under that type of a policy. Calderon and the Calderon government had took on the cartels and had done a lot of things as well, but that relaxed, particularly with these last two administrations. And we did see this recent thing of the arrest of this cartel leader in Mexico, and perhaps you'll see more of that. My own hypothesis on a larger scale is that it's a very complex problem, because I believe that the left in Latin America has financed itself into power using drug money. And so it makes it then difficult to go against the cartels when those are pre-established agreements. And so if somebody has made those, if some political leader has made those agreements, you try to go against those, you've declared essentially war.
Yeah. And unless, you're willing, like the president of El Salvador, when they had such problem with drug cartels and gangs causing violence in their country, they really doubled down and stood up to the violence until it was eradicated from, as much as they possibly could from their society.
I liked what Bukele has done in El Salvador. That's a case that I've watched very closely. In fact, I'm thinking of going down there because I'd like to talk to people on the street level. I've seen exactly how they feel. I've heard some positive comments about it, but the government is always in a position to overcome these cartels if it decisively goes against these.
Yeah.
One of the problems that Mexico faced, Mexico, of course, is a bigger country, but one of the problems that Mexico faced is that these cartels originally were controlled by the government, and then so the hypothesis of the federal government for attacking the cartels in the Calderon administration was based on that same paradigm. And that paradigm is that if you go in and cut off the heads, then you can eliminate the cartels. But at the same time, Mexico went through a democratic process. And when politics, for example, was democratized, organized crime was also democratized. So you had not one political party that controlled the whole network, but you had a governor from this other party, and then you had a president from this party and a mayor from this other party. So the cartels could deal with, in a very, you want to use the term democratic way, with whatever they could choose, whatever leader they wanted to work with, that wasn't from the same system of control. And so that did create a problem in dealing with these. Is this so many different levels and from so many different parties. There were commitments with local and larger cartels, that made that really difficult to address in the same way. So the idea of just cutting off heads kind of is a problem because it just metastasizes, and you'll probably see that with what happened with this recent head that was cut off also. That's what people are waiting to see, is what's going to happen underneath that.
Yeah, because it's not like one single guy is the mastermind behind the entire drug network of a cartel. Like, obviously he has guys that are close to him, and so when you cut off the head, naturally there's a power vacuum that these guys aren't gonna all of a sudden, oh, now our leader's dead, I guess we'll go get a real job and we'll start to contribute to society. It's like, no, this is a culture that is built off of, pride, power, violence. And when you cut off the head, unless you're willing to root out the rest of the body, then I don't see how that doesn't just create another space for someone else to rise into power. And likely, people in that network respond to violence and authority and ruthlessness. And so to see that spot not just be filled by some other psychopath, bloodthirsty guy who wants to be the leader of a drug kingpin, I don't know how it doesn't get solved without just going essentially to war against the cartels.
Well, you have the problem is more complex.
Yeah.
Than what you see, and as someone that lives in the U.S. like yourself,
yeah,
you probably don't see another dimension to this. But since Nixon declared the drug war in 1964, it was based on a hypothesis, a failed hypothesis that was applied in the U.S. During Prohibition. What is that hypothesis? That you can eradicate the consumption or diminish the consumption of drugs. In Prohibition, it was alcohol, by cutting down the supply lines. And so that same policy required two amendments to the U.S. Constitution, one to allow it and one to disallow it because of the bloodbath that it created, with Al Capone in Chicago and all the remaining areas. So the U.S. proved that that hypothesis was not effective and chose not to apply it. But since the drug war has been declared, since Nixon declared that in 1964, it was based on that same hypothesis. But the hypothesis now changes in the sense that it is applied outside the borders of the United States. So the bloodbath is outside of the United States.
Yeah.
So there's certain things that need to be looked at from that broader perspective as well. And why that happened.
So I mean, what would you think is a possible solution besides everyone suddenly repenting and coming unto Jesus Christ and not doing bad things, right? That would be the ideal scenario. But realistically, what do you think is going to be the solve that eradicates this type of corruption and evil that's happening?
Well, I mean, the thing is that's not something to easily dismiss, because really the long-term solution to anything is the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Of course.
And the gospel of Jesus Christ teaches people that if you want to change the world, start with yourself.
Yeah.
Start with your own life, put your own life in order, get your family's life in order, get your extended family's life in order, and your community in order. And it works from the inside out.
Yeah.
As opposed to the idea that some grand magician is going to come and put an end to everything.
Yeah.
And so the more people understand that, and the more people accept the responsibility over their own lives and how they are going to solve the problems of their own life, which they are directly in control of, it makes it hard to solve things, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm saying that you can't take that out of the picture. You have to remember that's a realistic proposal, of teaching. If you want to look at your Book of Mormon, how do they get rid of the Gadiant robbers?
Yeah. It said they hunted them down and preached the word of God to them. that scripture is so interesting, because when I think of like hunting people down, it's like, yeah, hunting them down and then, getting rid of them. But it said that they hunted the Gadiantans down and then they preached the gospel of Jesus Christ to utterly destroy them. And so I'm in agreement with you. I say that a little bit facetiously, just because in my mind, getting someone that, they cut people open alive and like literally like eat their hearts and things like this, and they're such savages, to think of them getting to a point in which they repent and come unto Jesus Christ. I would love to see that happen. And I think that's why, especially as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and anyone that professes to be a disciple of Jesus, there's a saying out there that if your price is not your life, then you are for sale. Meaning that if you truly do throw your hat in the ring saying, I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ, it's only a matter of time until the adversary himself or some worldly influence offers you money, fame, or power, influence enough to where if your price for your integrity and your discipleship of Jesus Christ is not your literal life, it's only a matter of time until you're going to get offered, whether it's actual money or something else of value, that you're going to compromise on your beliefs and therefore then just become another cog in the machine of corruption. But I'm curious, as a Latter-day Saint serving in what some would call the halls of Babylon, what was your experience in terms of if you were ever put in positions to compromise your beliefs, or your specific background in being a member of the church helped you to navigate certain situations?
Well, what I've always said is that if you, and I've observed this in my own experience, if you will clearly draw a line in the sand, and people know where you stand, then people around you will actually protect you as well.
Mm.
And if you very clearly say, these are what my beliefs are, and these are what my standards are, then people around you, when people try to approach you or something like that, they'll actually tell them. They say, don't do that, because it'll be worse for you if you come in and offer some money to him or something like that. And and they don't. I mean, it's from a very simple level, is they won't offer you drinks. If they know you don't drink alcohol, or they won't offer you anything that they know that's very clearly part of your values in your life and stuff like that too. But I think you need to draw your line very clear so that people know what that is. Mm-hmm. And that if you do that, I think that you have people around you that will protect you themselves. Mm-hmm. And I did have experiences like that. I was telling this one experience when I was undersecretary. I'd helped a group of small farmers put together some financing to buy, a whole bunch of tractors. And one time, the guy that was over that organization, mm-hmm. He called up after we'd done this and everything like that. It was like 6 or so months later, and he says, "Hey, where do you want us to send you your tractor?" And I said, "What do you mean, where do you want to send my tractor?" He says, "Well, yeah." He says, "We want to give you a tractor because we're really pleased that you helped us do this." And I says, "Well, you understand the law, that I can't receive anything over, $30 or something like that, what it was at the time, any type of a gift, larger than that." And he says, it'd cause me a problem if you actually, offered me a tractor or anything like that too. He says, "No, but don't take it like that." He says, "We are, you didn't condition us to give this to you, but we're doing this on our own because we appreciate what you did for us."
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Yeah. And I said, no. I said, "You can't." I said, if you really want to help me," I said, "you would actually be causing me a problem, because anything like that would cause problems for me in my future, because, I don't do anything like that." Mm-hmm. And then he said, "Well, you know what?" He said, "They told me that you were going to react that way, and that you were going to throw this in our face."
They?
Whoever his friends were.
Yeah.
And they said, if you want to give him a tractor, what you need to do is just take a tractor up to his ranch and drop it off, and don't tell him where it came from. Yeah. Well, I says, "Well, I'm glad you didn't do that, because, and he's a good friend to this day." But I think, see, stories like that, positive stories like that, go around to people as well.
Yeah.
When you resisted something that was offered to you or something like that, because the underworld always talks about what happens, mm-hmm. And they'll, what people's price is, mm-hmm. You can get them for this price and stuff like that too. And when that's a common thing, that's what people expect. But when you don't give into that also, really helps people appreciate and value what that is. But people will respect you a great deal if you lay down real clearly what you have. And I didn't see that, I didn't see that. But I think that the fact that people know that that's not part of your, that you will resist. One time that you resist something like that, one of those times of offer, that word will get around Just like if you ever do that once, if you ever fall into those things, that word will get around as well.
Yeah.
And so
And then
there's no way of getting
and then you're bought, and
you're bought. Yeah,
they know.
They just say, "What's your price level?" Because if you try to resist somebody after that, and a lot of people get into that. They say, "Well, I'll just do it once," but you do it once, and you're gone.
Yeah. No. And I just wanted to share that reference because I thought it was so powerful. I'm glad you brought it up. But in Helaman chapter 6, verse we'll do verse 36, starting in verse 36. It says, "And thus we see that the Lord began to pour out his spirit upon the Lamanites because of their easiness and willingness to believe in his word. And it came to pass that the Lamanites did hunt the band of Gadianton robbers, and they did preach the word of God among the more wicked part of them, insomuch that this band of robbers was utterly destroyed from among the Lamanites." And so you see that...
Were they destroyed or were they converted?
Exactly. It destroyed the band of Gadianton, the secret combination, but what it did was build the army of God. And so I love what you've shared with us today, and I'm grateful for your stalwartness in representing your faith, because it gives hope to a lot of people that see a lot of corruption, whether it's in Mexico, the United States, wherever it is. But to know that as Latter-day Saints, we need to set ourselves apart and draw that line in the sand and not be ashamed of the cause of Christ, because I think it's far too many weak-spined people that compromise even just a little bit, and then that slippery slope starts to go, and they find themselves then at its worst running, the drug trafficking of the cartels in Mexico. And so I think there's a lot to learn, but I just wanted to give it to you to share any last message or your testimony with anyone that's watching here. Yeah.
Well, let me just say this, though. Winston Churchill made a differentiation between what he called a politician and what was a statesman. And he said that a politician looks to the next election, and a statesman looks to the next generation. In other words, a statesman looks at the root causes and addresses those root causes. And one of the challenges that we have in the world now is that we have a world filled with politicians with short-term visions, and we have few statesmen. And one of the best compliments that I had was I received one time from Elder Richard Scott, and I was visiting with him one time in his office, and he just came up to me out of nowhere, and he said, Jeff, he said, the challenges you're having down there. And I was kind of threw me off guard. Says, what challenges does he know that I'm having down there? And anything like that too. He says, there are very, he says, one of the challenges of the world, he says, is that, he said, no, he says, Jeff, he says, you're facing these challenges, he says, because you are a statesman. And there are very few statesmen left in the world. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's what we need more of, is people that understand the broader and the long-term vision of creating a society that's stable and doing those things that will actually change the societies to be more stable. And I'm totally convinced, I guess, having been in what I call Babylon, which is the coercive expression of the coercive kingdom, that rules the world right now. And I've also had a lot of experience in what I consider to be Zion, and which is a voluntary kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And it teaches people to do things and to accomplish goals, but through voluntary means. Like the Doctrine and Covenants says, no power or influence can or maintained by virtue of the priesthood, only by persuasion, by long suffering, by gentleness and meekness, and by love and faith, by kindness and pure knowledge, which shall greatly enlarge the soul without hypocrisy and without guile. And that's really what the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ is about, is to create this voluntary kingdom where we lift one another, but through voluntary means, not through coercive means. By saying that, I don't dismiss the understanding that in this world that we live in, where people fall to the temptations of Satan, that there has to be also a coercive force for those that use coercion to deprive others of their life, of their liberty, and their property. But the problem that I see that happens, that we're facing in Mexico, is that we, and this is probably something that you'll see to a great degree in a lot of parts of the world, is that the governments of the coercive forces of the world not only have not complied with their basic function of protecting life, liberty, and property, but they have delegated that to organized crime. Mm-hmm. And that is unconscionable.
Yeah.
And but having been in government and having been in Zion and having been raised in Zion, I think it gives you a much better perspective to understanding the difference of these two kingdoms.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're here for, is we're here to build up Zion. And I am totally convinced that this is the mission of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is to build up this voluntary kingdom and establish this kingdom on the earth. And I feel that from the depths of my heart, you know.
Jeff, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience. Gracias por su servicio. That's as far as my Spanish goes there, Jeff. But God bless you. And, you know, hopefully no cartel sees this episode, but I think you'll be in the clear. Anyways, God bless you, Jeff. And thanks for coming on, brother.
You're right.
God bless you. And remember, until next time, if you're not looking at the world through a gospel lens, you're only getting half the story. God bless you.